This is UNFTR's On the Record for the week of December 8th, 2025, and it was Participation Trophy Mania this week with medals being handed out like chocolate from FIFA to the Kennedy Center. There are 3 plans brewing for healthcare with subsidies set to expire at the end of the year, and none of them are going to make it. Did you know that the Metaverse is still active? Kind of. Good news, Scott Bessent has a new favorite index, so inflation isn't real. The October budget blowout bonanza is here. Franny gets wicked, current affairs, Jacobin, and the Intercept get the headline nods this week, and book and pod love with so much more to go. Let's go. UNFTR. So look, first off, my apologies for how long this took to get out. I usually like to have these ready by about 6:30 in the morning so we can kick off the week together, but truth be told, I hit a bit of a wall. And look, it happens. Even the greatest brains with perfect cognitive scores, frankly, like ones we've never seen before, just have to go sleepy, go night-night nap time to rejuvenate. And, sometimes it happens even in the middle of meetings. Nevertheless, it was another historic, silly week for the Trump administration. And one of the hallmarks of a stable and majestic presidency like this one is to keep up appearances even during tough times. Because a nation relies on a steady hand, and traditions are meaningful. From White House Easter egg hunts to state dinners, the time-honored traditions of our great nation provide a sense of warmth and nostalgia. And one of our favorite, wonderful modern traditions is, of course, the Kennedy Center Honors, which got quite an upgrade this year with the president himself deciding to host.
Let's go to the videotape.
Watch some of the people that host. Jimmy Kimmel was horrible. Some of these people, if I can't beat out Jimmy Kimmel in terms of talent, then I don't think I should be president.
Fun fact, Jimmy Kimmel never hosted the Kennedy Center Honors, but facts don't matter, and apparently neither does taste. This year's honorees ranged from the band Kiss and country singer George Strait to the Phantom of the Opera himself and Sly Stallone, who gave the most inspired speech of the evening. Now, ever the sensitive one, the president made sure that diversity was front and center in the proceedings by also honoring legend Gloria Gaynor. And the president didn't disappoint when he said the one thing that all black women love to hear when complimented by a white man.
Now that's a good head of hair.
But the awards and accolades didn't end there, as FIFA, one of the most prestigious and not at all corrupt organizations in the world, unveiled a special peace participation trophy and bestowed it on the man who's running cover for his drunken war secretary's order to kill all fishermen in the Caribbean.
This is your peace prize. There is also a beautiful medal for you that you can wear everywhere you want to go.
I'm gonna wear it right now.
Okay, let me hold. Fantastic. Excellent.
All right, so let's get serious, because there was a lot of fuckery this week, not the least of which was the continuing drama around whether Pete Kegsbreath ordered the code red on Santiago. That is the wrong plot line. Sorry. Big news on immigration this week is the Trump administration rolled out a new provision stating that immigrants from 19 nations will have to start their naturalization journeys all over again, out of an abundance of caution after it was determined that American-born white supremacists are most responsible for mass casualties and acts of terrorism in the United States. As such, if you're from Sweden, Denmark, Ireland, Canada, Russia, Poland, Hungary, just to name a few, you're in danger of having your temporary status revoked entirely. Obviously, I'm kidding. That's not at all what it says. The actual list is Afghanistan, Myanmar, Chad, the Republic of Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, which, fun fact, does not have the internet, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen, and added restricted access applied to people from Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela. Couple of observations here. Several of these nations are the objects of asymmetrical, destabilizing military engagements and one-sided sanctions by the U.S. government, despite zero history of posing a threat to the United States. Can anyone spot another trend? Let's check in with Dr. Mark Lamont Hill. Mark?
Let's go to the videotape.
What used to be coded language about the rapists and the animals who would be coming from these other countries like south of the border, that language is now being replaced by outright claims that certain cultures are incompatible with the United States and that migration from the global south, the so-called third world, is a threat to society itself. They're not even pretending to not be racist.
That is an excellent reminder, by the way, to subscribe to Mark Lamont Hill's Night School on YouTube. I'll leave a link to it in the notes, but he is an incomparable educator. So if we strip away the callousness and the racism behind this procedural move, there's also a practical economic point of view that has to be discussed. This is also part of a much larger labor market piece that I'm dropping on Midas Touch later tonight, so make sure to check that out. Basically, immigration and mass deportation massively impact labor statistics. Recall that it's one of the primary motivating factors behind Stephen Myron's push to lower interest rates quickly and precipitously, because they see the deterioration in the labor market like we all do, but they're running out the clock this year by fudging the numbers through deportation. In fact, 2025 will be one of the only non-wartime years on record where we experience negative migration. There's no question this is impacting the labor market data because immigrants on temporary work visas, for example, are a huge factor during things like the harvest season in farm country and during the holidays when temporary labor surges. This doesn't even speak to the student and work visas that bring in highly skilled workers to urban centers to work in research, finance, tech, even medicine. And my guess is we'll start seeing research early next year on what this means to the broader economy. So there's no question that the labor market is incredibly soft. I mean, this is one of the issues that the Fed is grappling with in terms of rate cuts right now. But anecdotally, I think this does help explain why the jobless figures haven't completely blown out on an absolute basis, because we've never experienced net negative migration before. It's fascinating stuff, but it's also really scary. Now, there's still a lot of puzzle pieces that have yet to drop before the end of the year or shortly into the new year. For example, the Times just reported that the Supreme Court looks to be closing in on a decision to allow the executive broad authority to hire and fire agency heads at will. So that is awesome. And by awesome, I mean horrible. And of course, the decision on tariffs awaits in the new year, although Scott Bessent broke the news to Andrew Ross Sorkin that they have a plan to get around those if the court strikes them down.
But look, we can recreate the exact tariff structure with 301s, with 232s, with I think they're called 122.
But not permanently.
Permanently.
I'll have more to say on Bessent, the new bête noire of this program, in a moment, and the chart of the week will help illustrate just how fruitful these tariffs have actually been. But the other huge puzzle piece that has yet to be placed is, of course, healthcare. Time is running out to address the extension of Obamacare subsidies in Congress. So here's where we stand. There are three competing plans right now. We have Democrats, who of course caved on the government shutdown because Mike Little Johnson and John Thune pinky promised that we would address it before the end of the year. As it stands, the dynamic duo of Jeffries and Schumer are holding out for a clean resolution for a 3-year extension of premium subsidies, as is, and everybody knows that's not going to happen. As far as Republicans are concerned, though, House Majority Leader Steve Scalise said that GOP leadership was working independently on a plan that will be revealed before the end of the year, but no details were given. The only information that Scalise offered was that they are not considering the bipartisan proposal from Josh Bilbo Gottheimer's Problem Solvers Caucus, which took a break from liberating the dwarven kingdom of the Lonely Mountain to float a plan called Common Ground 2025 to extend the enhanced premium tax credits for 2 years with income caps based on formulas related to the poverty level. The Democrats don't have the votes to extend for 3 years. The Republicans won't say what their plan is, only that it doesn't include an extension of the current subsidies, and the bipartisan conference has no juice. So as far as we know, we are nowhere, and premiums are set to skyrocket in the beginning of the year. Now, smart money has it that the GOP will release some sort of plan before the end of the year, and it will be preposterous, which will lead Democrats to vote against it and lead Republicans to say that Democrats once again killed it all. Last fun note, Cold Fusion just released a video about Mark Zuckerberg's failed Metaverse, and the title says it all. The Metaverse has only 900 users. You know, if at first you don't succeed, try again. After that, just sell your soul to Donald Trump. I'll link it in the notes. Unfuckers delivered 2 huge wins for us this week. First off, you helped us hit 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. And you helped us hit our 2025 goal of 600 members, all with 3 weeks left to spare, no less. So thank you for the incredible support all throughout the year. Here are this week's new and returning members. We've got Facts Matter, Cincham, Scott, MSJPNW, Simonchick, Truth, Freedom, Love, from South Chicago, Yara Group, T, Dove Gray, Meliana, not to be confused with Melania, ST3, Maryland Mom, Papa Bear, Cranky Senior Trans Lady, Kimberly W, Coyote Jim, Wyofucker, Gigi, The Gige, Mickey 260, Not Blue CLK, SCal, Blue Flame 2026, and STX Sin. I have no words for the love and support coming from this community. And now, on to Max Notes. Okay, so the algorithm is now keenly aware of my obsession with the worst hedge fund manager turned Treasury Secretary, so I'm a little biased when it comes to my coverage of Scott Bessent. Now, when he was originally appointed, I actually said out loud on this program that he appeared to be the lone adult in the room, the lone voice in the administration who might be capable of at least steering the finances of the ship away from Trump's worst tendencies, and I was decidedly incorrect. Now, the reason I continue to focus on Bessent is because of the deepening financial crisis on Main Street and the looming catastrophe in the debt market that threatens to undermine the entire global capital order. Now, the one thing I was right on is that Bessent has been handed the keys to the entire economy. I mean, he's literally everywhere. So he's been tasked with finding the new Fed chair. There's speculation that if Kevin Hassett is the guy, they'll roll up his current responsibilities as the director of the National Economic Council into Bessent's job as well. Bessent is the one at the head of the table for all of these so-called trade negotiations, which aren't really trade negotiations, of course. They're just bully sessions where we continually don't get our way, and that's why we have one-sided tariffs and no real movement on anything that can be considered a trade agreement. He's also become the most visible media figure in this administration, trusted to make the rounds on any and every mainstream outlet possible. I mean, the guy is nothing if not indefatigable. So Bessent's blueprints are all over the economy. I mean, we've had influential Treasury secretaries before, especially those in times of crisis, but you'd have to go back a long way to find one who presides over so many aspects of economic policy. I mean, I'm talking Henry Morgenthau Jr. under FDR. But never has a Treasury Secretary been so disgustingly partisan. In every interview, he takes swipes at the Biden administration like a toddler. He has this habit also of addressing the interviewer by their first name before launching into a critique of their line of questioning. Well, Andrew, or well, Becky. Ugh, it's the most patronizing thing ever. And he stammers and he stumbles every time he's put on his heels by a position that he's reversed course on, like tariffs and interest rates, for example, and then gets defensive at the suggestion that there's anything wrong with this economy. And one of the funniest moments came in a recent Face the Nation interview when he quotes an index called the Common Man CPI as evidence that inflation is under control. And it's the media that's blowing things out of proportion, and you're just an asshole for saying anything about it.
I said that the Biden administration created the worst inflation in 50 years, and maybe for working Americans, the worst inflation of all time. And we have pulled that number down. That Strategas Research does something called the Common Man Index. Under Biden, the accumulated inflation number, as measured by CPI, was about 20%. Their index showed 35. This year, for the first time, the Common Man Index is below the inflation index because the basket of goods for working Americans, food, gasoline, rent is coming down.
This is the don't believe your lying eyes bullshit that he always pulls, but this one caught my attention because it's certainly not an index that I had ever heard of, and I look at a lot of this stuff. So I looked it up. The Common Man CPI is the product of a research firm and an asset management company called Strategas. And the CEO, Jason Trennert, appears pretty regularly on financial news channels and was even nominated earlier this year to be an assistant secretary of the Treasury before withdrawing his name for health reasons. So you know what? He's a public guy, likes to go out there and say a lot of shit all the time, was even in the running to become part of the administration. So you know what, motherfucker? You're fair game. So Trennert is a GOP stalwart, and he's a Trump promoter who unabashedly slams anything Democratic, and he built the Common Man CPI ostensibly to shit on the Biden economy. So here's the deal. Firms like Strategas make money in a couple of ways. One, from selling proprietary research to other firms on Wall Street and to investors. But two, by managing assets through managed accounts and strategies that investment advisors can allocate client money to. Now, the ability to publicize a proprietary index like the Common Man CPI is a big deal if it catches fire. I mean, think how much economists rely on ISM data or the Challenger Grain Christmas labor data, for example. These kind of things allow firms to punch above their weight and keep their names in the media. So when Bessent used the Common Man CPI in his Face the Nation interview to prove that inflation was under control, I couldn't resist. Now, full disclosure, I refuse to sign up for their research, and they don't make their current information publicly available. So the only one that we have is from 2024. But what I was really interested in was methodology. Now, the CMCPI is actually a smart index on the surface because it measures food, energy, shelter, clothing, utilities, and insurance, things that impact, well, the common person. And I'll assume for argument's sake that the new CMCPI shows inflation coming down more than the inflation data that we typically look at, because this excludes healthcare, services, automobiles, and other measures that aren't accessed routinely. So I'm being totally fair here. I think it's a fine idea. But there's no mention of data sources or methodology, so it's hard to test the veracity of this index, especially considering the hyper-partisan nature of the firm itself. So I decided to look at how good they are as asset managers, and you will not believe what I found. They kind of suck. Every managed strategy performs below their benchmark, every single one. And the firm boasts about $500 million in assets under management, or AUM, which is a rounding error in the world of finance. And their directly managed strategies are, let's say, lackluster at best. For example, their blue chip opportunity strategy. Over the past 3 years, if you invested in this strategy, the return was 13.9% net of fees. Not bad, right? Not bad until you realize that their benchmark, the index that they chose as their main competitor, is the S&P 500, which returned 24.9% over the same time period. That's double. Pick a strategy. Doesn't matter. They're all the same. So imagine this. The failed hedge fund manager in charge of the Treasury, in charge of all of our trade deals and selecting the next Fed chair, is going around promoting an index compiled by a Trump-supporting asset manager who got smoked by the most prominent and obvious stock market index in the world. Am I being petty? You bet I am. You know why? Because these are big jobs. These are big jobs meant for serious people, and I've never seen a more unserious group of people who think they're smarter than everyone else. And you know what? Stupidity and hubris, that's a bad combination. All right, time for a killer left take of the week. Our KLTW goes to friend of the show, Francesca Fiorentini of the Bituation Room, once again. In this episode, Francesca brings the politics to pop culture by likening the battle for ideas between liberals and leftists to Glinda and Elphaba. And there's a couple reasons that I love this. The first thing is that Francesca kicked off a series of long-form pieces like this earlier this year, and this is the content that we need more of from creators that we have too few of. And secondly, it's important to bring political and economic themes into pop culture to surface and inspire discussions like this, similar to how previous KLTW FT Signifier used his platform to deconstruct sinners. The world needs more Francesca.
Doing something symbolic yet harmless to virtue signal that you care. Kind of like, I don't know, kneeling in a kente cloth while doing all to reform the criminal justice system, or speaking on the Senate floor for 25 hours without disrupting any of the GOP's legislation. The only thing that wasn't empty in Cory Booker's gesture was his diaper. Elphaba and Glinda's reactions to the wizard having no power are also very different. Elphaba rejects the keys to the kingdom and leaves Emerald City in disgust, vowing to expose the wizard and save the animals, whereas Glinda's like, it's kinda nice here. I think I'll stay.
Chart of the week. We're already 2 months into the new year as measured by the federal government's official budget. See, the U.S. fiscal calendar begins in October, so we have the first official figures for the real deal Trump economy. No hiding behind Biden anymore, baby. A quick peek reveals what you might imagine. We are completely and utterly fucked. October alone produced a $284 billion shortfall. Now, tariff revenue came in at $31 billion just for October, which is just a hair under the trillion-dollar figures that Trump keeps talking about. Also, tariff revenues are about half of the monthly earnings of the Magnificent Seven tech stocks. Also, corporate taxes are half of tax revenue. Let me know when you spot the problem. All right, on to headlines. Our first one comes from The Intercept. Boat strike survivors clung to wreckage for some 45 minutes before the U.S. military killed them. I want to try out a couple of variations of the opening sentence of this one. Let's try this one. The drug smugglers clung to the capsized boat for 45 minutes before a second strike wiped them out. Or we've got the fishermen clung to the capsized boat for 45 minutes. Or how about the violent cartel members clung to the capsized boat? Or the synchronized swimming team from Grenada clung to the boat. Who the fuck would know who was clinging to the boat? Also, can we stop calling it a double tap? This is a reference to Zombieland, and it minimizes the war crime. From the article, quote, during the Thursday briefings, Bradley claimed that he believed there was cocaine in the quarter of the boat that remained afloat, according to the sources. He said the survivors could have drifted to land or to a rendezvous point with another vessel, meaning that the alleged drug traffickers still had the ability to transport a deadly weapon, cocaine, into the United States, according to one source. Next up from the Jacobin, we have the socialist case for nuclear power. If ever there was a subject that called for us to, quote, listen to the science, it's energy. The case for nuclear has been growing stronger and louder in the recent years as we fall fantastically short of anything that can be considered a net zero future. Now, as someone who grew up in the shadow of nuclear controversy on Long Island, I'm a little jaded, but I'm open to the discussion. And I wonder if there's any scientific consensus in the community surrounding nuclear that isn't sullied by emotion or fossil fuel lobbying money. Now, not an expertise of mine, so if you have thoughts on this, please leave them in the comments. Quote, here we have an issue. Many on the left have a simplistic vision of a post-fossil fuel future. It is seen merely as a transition to renewables, or more specifically, solar and wind energy. But from a technical and engineering standpoint, it is clear that the transition away from fossil fuels cannot be accomplished by variable renewable energy alone, end quote. Again, let me know what you think about that one, because it is not my wheelhouse. Now, rounding out headlines, we have Washington's Gallery of Puppets from Current Affairs magazine, and because I'm an alt-rock child of the 80s and 90s, my brain immediately starts singing Put Your Hand Inside the Puppet Head, which is my favorite song by They Might Be Giants, but I digress. You know, we love harboring would-be kings and queens of foreign lands within the United States. And it usually works out pretty well when we overthrow their home countries and install them. Oh, no, I meant to say it actually never fucking works out. Quote, there's one more thing that Pahlavi and Machado have in common. Among the details of their transition plans, they have both pledged to sell off their country's public assets. Pahlavi's NGO has published several white papers on the urgency of selling the country's state-owned enterprise, end quote. All right, book and podlove before we get out of here. The first one is The Dig Podcast, 3 Million Doors with Tasha Van Auken, how Zoran's campaign mobilized an army of 100,000 volunteers to knock on 3 million doors. Pretty impressive stuff. We definitely need to be studying this campaign for a long time, and what better way to start than by listening to The Dig? And the book of the week is Enshittification. I'm a little late to this dance because it came out, I think, a month or two ago, but this is why everything suddenly got worse and what to do about it by Cory Doctorow. All right, this has been On the Record for the week of December 8, 2025. Sources for everything that we discussed are in the notes below, and a huge thank you once again to all the unfuckers who answered the call to help us hit our milestones with a month to spare, no less. We have 2 more On the Records before we take a break at the end of the year, but plenty of content coming both here and on Midas Touch, so make sure you're subscribed in both places if you haven't already done so. And we're excited to announce that in the new year, we have a new interactive trivia feature to test your progressive knowledge coming on the website. So make sure you're signed up for our free weekly newsletter. Just go to UNFTR.com for all the things. Sorry again for the delay today, and I hope you have a great week ahead.